If you hear the number 80, most people immediately think of decline, less strength, more losses, a shrinking world. But when researchers actually study people in their 70s, 80s, and beyond, a very different picture appears. Not because life gets easier, but because priorities change. By the time someone reaches 80, much of what once felt urgent no longer matters in the same way. Status loses weight. Long-term plans narrow. Time is experienced differently, and that shift has measurable psychological effects. Across multiple longitudinal studies, older adults often report greater emotional stability than younger adults. Not more happiness in the naive sense, but fewer intense negative emotions, less reactivity, and a stronger sense of inner balance. This is not denial, it is adaptation. What 80 years of life really mean is not the end, but a stage where only what truly carries weight remains. And to understand that, it helps to count it down backwards, because the most important lessons of later life are also the least glamorous. We start with the ones most people misunderstand. Let's begin with number 6. 6 is the belief that turning 80 means living mostly in loss. From the outside, that assumption makes sense. Health problems are more common. Friends and partners may be gone. Roles that once structured daily life disappear. But psychologically, something else happens. According to socio-emotional selectivity research, as people perceive the remaining time as more limited, they naturally shift their attention. Energy moves away from distant goals, competition, and accumulation, and toward emotionally meaningful experiences. Older adults become more selective. They invest less in what drains them, and more in what feels essential. As a result, they often experience less anger, less chronic anxiety, and fewer emotional extremes, even while facing objectively harder circumstances. In other words, 80 is not defined by having less. It is defined by choosing more carefully. People who struggle most in later life are not those with the most losses, but those who continue to measure their worth by standards that no longer fit their stage of life. Which leads directly to number 5. 5 is confusing external achievement with personal value. Much of adult life trains us to link worth to productivity, career, recognition, contribution, measured in output. But long-term well-being studies show that these factors lose predictive power with age. What increasingly matters is whether a person feels they have lived in accordance with their values. By 80, professional titles fade, financial markers become less central. What remains is the internal narrative. Did my life make sense to me? Can I accept my choices, including the imperfect ones? Gerontological research shows that older adults with a coherent life story, one that integrates mistakes, limits, and growth, show lower depression rates and higher life satisfaction, even with physical decline. This is not about pretending everything was good. It is about meaning-making. At 80, life satisfaction depends less on what you achieved and more on whether you can say, "This was my path, and I can stand behind it." Now we come to number 4. 4 is taking relationships for granted. Across cultures and studies, one finding is strikingly consistent. The quality of close relationships predicts well-being in old age more strongly than income, education, or past success. As people age, their social circles often shrink, not because of isolation alone, but because of choice. Older adults tend to prioritize fewer, deeper connections over many superficial ones. This selectivity is not withdrawal. It is focus. End-of-life research repeatedly shows that the most common regrets are not about career ambition. They are about missed emotional opportunities, not saying what mattered, not repairing what could have been repaired, not expressing love when time still allowed it. By 80, unresolved relational tension carries more psychological weight than any professional disappointment. People who report greater peace later in life are typically those who learned earlier to address conflict, express appreciation, and accept relational imperfection rather than avoiding it. Which brings us to number 3. 3 is neglecting the relationship with oneself. For decades, many people stay busy to avoid self-confrontation. Roles, responsibilities, and obligations leave little quiet space. But later life inevitably creates more internal time. Physical limits reduce external activity. Social roles narrow. Silence becomes more present. Research shows that older adults who have developed self-acceptance, a realistic but compassionate view of themselves, adapt far better to this shift. They experience less loneliness, fewer depressive symptoms, and greater emotional stability. Those who reach advanced age without this inner relationship often experience the same circumstances as emptiness. Those who have cultivated it experience them as calm. The difference is not external. It is internal familiarity. By 80, you spend more time with yourself than with anyone else, and that relationship either becomes a refuge or a source of discomfort, which leads to number 2. 2 is ignoring unresolved regret. Regret does not disappear with age. In fact, studies show that unprocessed regret becomes more emotionally salient later in life, not less. The most painful regrets are not about failure, but about inaction. Things not said, choices avoided, authenticity postponed. Research in palliative psychology shows that unresolved regret strongly predicts emotional distress at the end of life. But it also shows something hopeful. People who actively address regret earlier by apologizing, reconnecting, reframing past decisions, or making peace with limits significantly reduce later psychological suffering. The key is not erasing the past. It is integrating it. At 80, peace is not about having lived perfectly. It is about having stopped running from what remains unresolved. And now we arrive at number 1. The most misunderstood truth about 80 years of life. 1 is believing that meaning and growth end with youth. Older theories framed late life as withdrawal. Modern research contradicts this. Sense of purpose, spiritual orientation, and contribution, even in quiet, remain strongly associated with well-being, lower depression, and even better physical outcomes in advanced age. Contribution no longer looks like building or achieving. It looks like witnessing, listening, passing on perspective. Gerontology describes this shift as moving from doing to being, from accumulation to transmission. People who embrace this transition report greater gratitude, less bitterness, and a deeper sense of peace. At 80, growth does not stop. It changes form. Meaning becomes less about expansion and more about depth. When you look at the evidence as a whole, 80 years of life do not represent a finish line. They represent a filtering process. What falls away is noise. What remains is alignment. Research suggests that by this stage, well-being depends less on circumstances and more on how a person relates to time, relationship, self-understanding, regret, and meaning. If you are younger, this knowledge is not abstract, it is practical. These patterns do not suddenly appear at 80. They develop slowly over decades. If you are closer to this stage, the same evidence offers reassurance. You are not late. You are not behind. You are simply in a phase where clarity matters more than accumulation. 80 years of life do not mean being at the end. They mean standing at a point where only what truly matters still asks for your attention. And that, according to the research, is not a loss. It is a refinement.